The end of the Pacific War in 1945 marked the collapse of Japan's imperial ambitions and the conclusion of one of the most devastating conflicts in human history. After nearly 4 years of brutal warfare, Japan faced overwhelming military defeats, economic collapse, and strategic isolation. The final year of the war witnessed a series of decisive battles, catastrophic bombings, and the unprecedented use of nuclear weapons, culminating in Japan's unconditional surrender. This article examines the military, political, and social factors that led to Japan's downfall and the transformation of the Pacific region in the aftermath. Japan's situation by early 1945. By January 1945, Japan's situation was dire. Territorial losses. Japan had lost key islands across the Pacific, including the Marianas, Philippines, and Iwo Jima. Naval and air losses. The Imperial Japanese Navy and Air Force were severely depleted after battles such as Leyte Gulf and Okinawa. Economic collapse. Allied blockades and bombings crippled production, food supply, and transportation. Despite propaganda insisting on ultimate victory, Japan was effectively fighting a defensive war, with its capacity to wage large-scale offensive operations severely curtailed. The Allied strategy in the Pacific. The Allied strategy in 1945 focused on island hopping, capturing strategic islands to move closer to the Japanese home islands. Naval blockade, cutting off supplies to Japanese forces and cities. Strategic bombing, destroying industrial and civilian centers to weaken Japan's war effort. Preparation for invasion. Planning Operation Downfall, the projected invasion of Kyushu and Honshu. American forces, leveraging overwhelming industrial and technological superiority, advanced relentlessly, forcing Japan into increasingly desperate defensive positions. Key military campaigns. 1. Battle of Iwo Jima, February-March 1945. One of the bloodiest battles in the Pacific. U.S. Marines faced fierce Japanese resistance entrenched in caves and bunkers. Nearly 7,000 Americans were killed, while Japanese casualties were over 18,000. The island's capture allowed the U.S. to use it as an air base for bombing missions on Japan. 2. Battle of Okinawa, April-June 1945. Last major battle before a planned invasion of Japan. Okinawa's capture required amphibious assaults against entrenched Japanese forces. Japanese defenders employed kamikaze attacks, causing massive Allied naval losses. Casualties: over 12,000 American troops and over 100,000 Japanese soldiers, with tens of thousands of civilians killed. Okinawa highlighted Japan's willingness to fight to the last man and foreshadowed the potential cost of invading the home islands. Strategic bombing and civilian devastation. Firebombing of Japanese cities. U.S. forces conducted carpet bombing raids on major cities such as Tokyo, Nagoya, Osaka, and Kobe. The Tokyo firebombing, March 1945, killed over 100,000 civilians and destroyed large portions of the city. These raids crippled Japan's industrial capacity and destroyed morale. Effects on the population. Widespread hunger and displacement. Psychological shock from constant air raids. Collapse of infrastructure hampered communication, transport, and medical care. The atomic bombings. Hiroshima, August 6, 1945. The Enola Gay dropped the first atomic bomb, Little Boy, on Hiroshima. Immediate deaths, 70,000 to 80,000, with tens of thousands more dying from radiation. Nagasaki, August 9, 1945. The second bomb, Fat Man, destroyed Nagasaki. Death toll, 40,000 to 75,000, with countless survivors suffering long-term effects. The atomic bombings, combined with the Soviet declaration of war, demonstrated that Japan could not hope to repel Allied forces and forced reconsideration within the Japanese leadership. Soviet entry into the war. On August 8, 1945, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan, invading Manchuria. The Soviet offensive shattered Japan's remaining Guangdong army. This opened a new front and destroyed hopes for a negotiated surrender based on Soviet mediation. Japan's decision to surrender. Faced with devastation of cities and infrastructure from bombings, Soviet advances in Manchuria, threat of an Allied invasion, and widespread starvation and economic collapse, Japan's leadership finally decided to accept unconditional surrender. Emperor Hirohito announced surrender on August 15, 1945, citing the new and most cruel bomb. The formal signing occurred aboard the USS Missouri on September 2, 1945, officially ending the Pacific War. Consequences of Japan's downfall. 1. Occupation and reconstruction. Japan was occupied by Allied forces, led by General Douglas MacArthur. Democratic reforms, demilitarization, and economic reconstruction transformed Japan into a peaceful nation. 2. End of Japanese imperial ambitions. Japan relinquished all overseas territories, including Korea, Taiwan, and Pacific Islands. The nation renounced war and established a pacifist constitution. 3. Global implications. The atomic bombings introduced the world to nuclear warfare. U.S.-Japan relations became a cornerstone of post-war Asia. Japan's defeat shifted the balance of power in East Asia, paving the way for the rise of Cold War dynamics. The end of the Pacific War in 1945 was the result of a combination of overwhelming Allied military power, strategic bombing, the atomic bomb, and the Soviet declaration of war. Japan's downfall demonstrated the devastating effectiveness of modern industrialized warfare and the human cost of prolonged conflict. From Iwo Jima and Okinawa to the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, 1945 exemplifies the final desperate struggle of a once formidable empire facing the inevitable consequences of total war.